What's up, everybody? Charlie Marlow here. Got to jump on and talk about these college football playoff final rankings. The Final Four just announced. Michigan won. Number 2, Washington. Number 3, Texas. And yes, the committee, in my opinion, got it right, making Alabama number 4, which means undefeated Florida State out of the college football playoff. What do you guys think about that? Comment, like, subscribe. This is the most fun time of the year if you like to argue and debate about college football. Really, yesterday into today, and now we can break down for the next couple of days, really for the next several weeks, if the committee got it right, which, let's be real, some people think they got it right. A lot of people think they got it wrong. And I understand people who are pissed right now about Florida State going undefeated 13-0, Power 5 conference, ACC, and not getting in the college football playoff. But look, it's not fair. It's the final year of this. I'm going to kind of miss the debate around the 4 because nobody's going to care as much about the 13th team. So I do wish they would have went to 6 or 8 because, hell, 12. Okay, some 3-loss team is going to have some big bicker about getting in next year. Part of the fun, half the fun in my opinion, is arguing about who gets in and who doesn't. This just happened to be a really, really weird year with what also happened with Texas beating Alabama. So, of course, you can't put Alabama in without putting Texas in. Florida State gets squeezed out. I feel bad for those guys. But look, when Jordan Travis went down, let's be real, if you watch the games, they were not the same team. And style points do matter clearly. Anybody who's bringing up the precedent of Ohio State in 2014, look, Ohio State with Cardale Jones won 59-0. 59-0. Then they went on to win the national championship. I'll still to this day say, hey, we'll never know. Maybe TCU could have won the national championship that year. I don't know. I doubt it, but you can't really say that because TCU didn't get a shot. But that Ohio State team won 59-0. They ran it up that year. And so if Florida State, look, I truly believe if Florida State wins that game against Louisville 35-10 or something of that nature, I think Florida State gets in. It just wasn't impressive. And I said that going into the fourth quarter, I'm watching that game. I think it was, what was it? Was it 10-6 or something like that? Louisville's driving. Maybe it was 10-3. I don't even remember the score at the time. It was third quarter into the fourth quarter. I'm thinking, I don't think Florida State deserves to get in even if they win the game. And that's just because of what had already transpired earlier in the day. You know, you saw Michigan was going to roll in one of the most boring games in the history of football. Iowa is just embarrassingly bad, especially on offense. But once Alabama beat Georgia, you knew this was going to be just the craziest decision in the history of the college football playoff. And it's kind of fitting that in the last year of the college football playoff with 4, it goes out with all this controversy. And like I said, I'd be ticked too if I'm Florida State, but this was one of those weird years. And I'm not going to sit here, by the way, and advocate for Ohio State. I did that. I've done that every year they don't get in. But every year they had a case. And I actually think they had a case this year, but I totally understand why they didn't get in. And I wasn't even lobbying for them at all. But my point is more so this. The bucket of teams, we always like to say the bucket, especially for baseball on this Cardinals channel. You have the starting pitching buckets, the top tier, the second bucket, the fifth starter bucket. I would say with the upper tier of college football, at the end of this year, in my opinion, you had one bucket. The top bucket after yesterday was Michigan and Washington, the 2 undefeated 13-0 teams that were impressive with wins down the stretch. I'm not including Florida State because even though they're also undefeated 13-0, they did not impress after Jordan Travis went down. So number 1 bucket, or the top tier, that is Michigan and Washington, and that's the way it was slotted. Look, you can make the case that Washington's the best team in the country. Who knows? I think Michigan-Alabama is the national championship game. I think it's like last year. I'm not trying to hate on Texas or Washington, but I think whoever wins Alabama-Michigan wins the national championship. But so, top-tier bucket. The second bucket, if I have my math correct, I think it's fair to say, you may disagree, and I want to hear from you. Reply in the comments if you disagree. But I think the second bucket has 5 teams. Now, the third bucket, none of those teams had a real complaint. And I guess that would be what, like Is that like Missouri, Ole Miss, Penn State? I haven't even looked. But the 2-loss type teams, none of those teams have any type of complaint. But this year, you could make the case for the other 5 teams should have been in those 3-4 spots. And I get, by the way, why Georgia wasn't, Ohio State wasn't. And also, so wait, Oregon, we're dropping Oregon out. So let me do my math here, because I'm confusing myself. Top bucket, Michigan, Washington. Second bucket, the teams that got in, which is Texas, Alabama, Georgia. Okay, Ohio State. I think I got that wrong. I think there are 4 teams in the second bucket. Oregon lost. Oregon with 2 losses now. They don't have a say. See, I had to correct myself. 4 teams in the second bucket. And by the way, I totally get why nobody's advocating for Ohio State. My point is more so, if you look at their resume, it's essentially equal to that of Georgia. You could make the case Ohio State would probably be favored, so would Georgia over Florida State. So basically, look, it was just a really hard year to pick the 4 teams. Some of those years, like there's always that 5th team that's left out, and there's not a lot of depth after that. The first year it was TCU. Many of these years, by the way, it was Ohio State. Almost every year Ohio State doesn't get in, they're almost always that 5th team. They have 1 loss, and it's usually to Michigan. But so I don't know. I want to hear what you guys think. Michigan, obvious. Washington, obvious. I just think Texas, you win the Big 12. You win it impressively. You had already beat Alabama earlier in the year. The second Alabama beats Georgia, you knew Georgia basically played itself out of the college football playoff. Ohio State never really had a chance. They would have needed a miracle. And then who am I missing? That's everybody. Florida State. So Florida State, again, I feel bad, but Florida State was not the same team. And look, if you miss your best safety or your best, I don't know, even wide receiver, but it's different when it's the quarterback. And I would have said that about any of these teams. If Michigan went undefeated or Washington went undefeated, and then J.J. McCarthy basically got hurt, and they didn't look close to as good. Now, I guess that's different because they're undefeated. So is Florida State. See, this is how difficult this is. Penix Jr. is the same way. So if Washington would have won their last games, but it's not impressive, Penix Jr. is out, it just would have been looked upon differently, as I guess what I'm saying here. You also have to look at, you see how I'm confusing myself? This is how difficult it is. Imagine sitting in there in the college football playoff committee. It's not an easy job. Like, I could totally understand why you'd put Florida State in. I disagree with that. I think they got it right. I could totally get it why you still think, look, I think Georgia is probably one of the best 4 teams in the country. I think Ohio State's one of the best 4 teams in the country. But it's just not fair. That's what happens when we only have 4 teams. I guess that's a good part about the expanded playoff is I don't think we needed 12, but I do think if you want to crown the true best team in college football, I think you needed to move that to 6 or to 8, because I think in a lot of these years, you could make the case that the 5th or 6th team could have won the national championship. I don't think you can do that in college basketball. Nobody says, oh, the 69th team is going to win the national championship. But this year, would it really surprise you if Georgia got in, if they won the national championship? That would not surprise me. And you can make fun of me. It wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State, if they got in, if they could win the national championship. Florida State, who knows? I mean, I doubt it. They wouldn't be favored, but it wouldn't surprise me if Florida State gets in, gets hot, wins some low-scoring games. They have a really good defense. I don't know. I think you can see as I'm kind of just sitting here talking, and I'm confusing myself. That's how difficult this decision is. And I didn't watch the selection show, by the way. I was actually taking a wagon walk with my kids, and I checked and saw the update. So I don't know their rationale, and I'm gonna check that after the fact here. But I just want to jump on while this is trending, and just give my 2 cents. Again, I think they got it right. Michigan, I think, is the best team in the country. Washington. And if you want to say Washington should be number 1, I'm not going to really argue much with that. I think you had to put Texas in. I do think you should look at a team that schedules Alabama out of conference and then goes into their building and beats them. To win at Alabama non-conference is massive. That just essentially never happens. You have to give Texas credit for that. Then they won their Big 12 championship game, and they won it pretty easily. What was it, 49-24? I can't remember the exact score, but it was an easy win. And then Alabama, you go on a quote-unquote neutral field, but it's in Atlanta, and you beat Georgia, the two-time defending national champs, in a close game. And then the other part is there's a pedigree here. And I was arguing with people on Twitter about this, but it does matter that it's Alabama. It does matter that it's the brand. It does matter that it's Nick Saban, because we've seen Alabama and Nick Saban win. What does Nick Saban have? 7 national championships, 6 of them with Alabama. If the team that won last night and beat Georgia, I put this on Twitter also, was a 12-1 Ole Miss, a 12-1 Auburn, you would not see the same fervor to get them in as Alabama, because we've seen Alabama and Nick Saban win national championships with a loss, and it wouldn't surprise me if Alabama wins the national championship this year. So I get why people are pissed, especially Florida State. It's not fair, but man, it's fun for the debate. You might as well go out crazy, College Football Playoff Committee, with the last year of 4 and just piss everybody off. That's what happened. But that's the beauty of college football. That's the beauty of this playoff. I think we're going to lose a lot of that actually next year. We're not going to have this fun debate at all. A lot of these games that were elimination games aren't going to matter. Look at Ohio State, Michigan. That was an elimination game. Look at Washington, Oregon, Pac-12 championship game. That was an elimination game for the playoff. Obviously, Georgia, Alabama became an elimination game for the playoffs. Florida State, you could even say by winning. I mean, they had to not only win, but win impressively. So it's not going to be the same next year with 12 teams. Nobody's going to care about the 13th team. Even Ohio State, Michigan. That game, which is so fun, so much on the line. Every year, Ohio State and Michigan are probably going to be top 5-ish, top 10. They probably have undefeated records or maybe one loss. They're probably going to meet again in the Big Ten championship game, depending on how that all works out. And then they could hell meet again in the college football playoff. I think that's kind of interesting, because a lot of people, me included, said, you know, the Big Ten screwed itself by not having the rematch. But then let's say Ohio State beats Michigan. Do you think Michigan actually would get in that scenario? Probably not, because look, Georgia lost to Alabama, and entering that weekend, I thought actually that the SEC would get 2 teams in if Alabama beat Georgia close like they did. But everything else fell the way of the other teams. Texas winning, Florida State not winning impressively, and Washington winning. Obviously, if Oregon would have won that game, look, Oregon probably doesn't make it either. Yeah, I would say if Washington doesn't win, Oregon doesn't get in, and it's a pretty easy call for the playoff committee, and they put Florida State in, so that it would be, in that scenario would have been what? Michigan, I guess you go Texas, Alabama, and Florida State, most likely in that scenario. All right. Tell me what you guys think. Am I crazy? Do you see how I literally was confusing myself during the talk? That's how difficult this selection was. And again, so in my opinion, there were 2 upper tier teams. It's 4 teams in that second bucket that all had a legit claim to be the 3rd and 4th. That's Ohio State. That's Georgia. That's Florida State. That's Texas. And only 2 of those teams could get in. So there you go. I'm not good at math. Anyway, I'll shut up. This video's gone long enough. Let me know what you think. Comment, like, subscribe. We'll get back to Cardinals baseball, but college football playoff is super fun. Everybody loves it. So let me know what you think. Comment, like, subscribe. Peace out. Enjoy your Sunday, everybody.